To prepare for a potential war in the Pacific, the Marine Corps is undergoing a radical transformation. The Marines, the few, the proud, well known for being used as expeditionary shock troops, their penchant for debauchery, and as the abused branch of the armed services. From their birth at Tongue Tavern to their integration with the United States Navy in 1834, their primary objectives have been to quickly seize naval bases, coordinate amphibious landings, and otherwise support naval campaigns. Only recently, during Vietnam and the global war on terror, did that focus shift. The World War II island hopping campaigns in the Pacific cemented their reputation as a naval force multiplier, and with current American ambitions to counter China's claim in Southeast Asia, the Marines are currently training to replicate this success should the powder keg in the Pacific be lit. Through their Expeditionary Advanced Base Operations Doctrine and Force Design 2030, the major overhaul in the Marine Corps that saw them shed Abrams tanks
I don't want to play with you anymore.
and get better gear to the grunts, like suppressors and high cuts, they're not just upgrading what frontline Marines wear into battle, they're getting weapon systems that will give them a capability like they've never had before, like taking out warships from over 150 miles away on land and dropping hundreds of enemy drones at the push of a button. To accomplish this, the Corps is rolling out new weapons like the Nemesis and the Expeditionary Directed Energy Counter-Swarm, or XDEX system. New units are even being created, all to give the average enlisted dirt person the ability to be an even bigger thorn in anybody's side who decides to try them. So let's talk about why there is an aggressive shift happening right now in the Marine Corps, what weapons, strategies, and tactics they're bringing to bear to accomplish their mission, and why some people think this is a dumb idea. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to Odoo for sponsoring today's episode. If you're still juggling spreadsheets, sticky notes, and 6 different software platforms just to keep your business running, stop. There's a better way. Odoo is a fully integrated business management system built to handle everything from the sales floor to the shop floor. Let's start with inventory. Odoo's inventory dashboard gives you instant clarity, receipts, delivery orders, point of sale transactions, you name it. You'll know what's in, what's out, what's late, and what's back ordered all at a glance. You can automate vendor reminders, set deliveries, and pay for receipts in just a few clicks. Whether you run a garage startup or a multi-warehouse operation, Odoo helps you move faster and smarter. And when it comes to manufacturing, Odoo's dashboard puts your whole production line on one screen. Track work orders, monitor assembly stations, and keep an eye on load times. Use the mobile barcode app to scan components in real time, cutting down on delays and input errors without ever touching a keyboard. Need to tweak your bill of materials or reference a worksheet? It's all built in and it's all synced. And here's the kicker, it all works together. Sales, e-commerce, CRM, inventory, manufacturing is not just integrated, it's seamless. So if you're ready to stop duct taping your business systems together, head to odoo.com and get your first app totally free. No credit card, no trial period, just powerful tools free for life. You've got enough to manage, let Odoo handle the rest. So why is the Marine Corps, a branch pretty resistant to any form of change, so eager to transform itself? We already discussed in depth the Chinese strategy in the South China Sea in an earlier video about the US reviving World War II era bases in the Pacific, so we will spare you the gritty details there, but feel free to check it out if you haven't already. Basically, Chinese forces are pushing further west through the construction of artificial islands and an expansion of their military capabilities. This pushes targets out of reach of US weapon systems and puts US targets in reach of Chinese ones. Naturally, this is forcing some big changes to be undertaken, like reclaiming airfields abandoned after World War II and significantly increasing our presence on Guam. Marines will have to defend those remote airfields and islands and potentially capture more, so they're getting ready. Before leaders could even think about equipping Marines with these new capabilities, they had to have the right units to equip. This is multi-domain warfare, a fancy way of saying fighting everywhere at once, even in cyberspace, unlike anything the Marines have experienced before. Though they manned coastal batteries in World War II and could reach out and touch enemy boats about 25 miles away, they didn't have to worry about electronic warfare, hackers taking down their weapons, precision munitions fired from hundreds of miles away, drone swarms, and all the other new exciting horrors of war. To answer these new threats in the spirit of Force Design 2030, the Marines created the Marine Littoral Regiments out of the 3rd and 12th Marine Regiments, and a third is on their way, each one eventually numbering about 2,000 Marines. Littoral basically means just like coastal or shallow, but shallow coastal really isn't as fun to say. This new structure has a Littoral Combat Team, or LCT, which has the Anti-Ship Muscle, a Littoral Anti-Air Battalion, and a Littoral Logistics Battalion. A typical Marine regiment is comprised of 4 infantry battalions, and no other support is organic to it. Traditionally, those services are provided by units outside of the regiment like your CLBs, Combat Logistics Battalions, and LAD, or Low Altitude Air Defense Battalions. By bringing these capabilities inside the same regiment, the Marines seem to be acknowledging that the next fight they could face will be won or lost on the ground, in large part due to air defense and logistics. This is a pretty radical shift that reflects the reality the U.S. is facing in the Pacific. With new units given their task and purpose, see what I did there? The Marines have been in the lab cooking up some new weapons and the tactics to go with them. To take out ships from land, Uncle Sam's misguided children have adopted a weapon developed by Norwegian company Kongsberg called the Naval Strike Missile that they shoved on a remotely operated JLTV called Rogue Fires and dubbed it the Navy Marine Expeditionary Ship Interdiction System, or Nemesis, which, as far as military acronyms go, is top-notch. The Nemesis and his Marines are capable of deploying quickly to remote islands to ward off enemy naval forces. With a range of about 160 miles, or roughly 260 kilometers, Marines are creating highly mobile, easily concealed, remotely operated coastal batteries capable of locking down ship lanes. You know those big, scary Chinese invasion barges that we've all seen? The stealthy and low-flying naval strike missile represents a significant threat to those. While new maritime strike Tomahawks fired from the Army's Typhoon and Marine Long-Range Fires Launcher can reach about 1,000 miles, they're slower and easier for missiles or close-in weapon systems to detect and defeat. The Naval Strike Missile has a top speed of about 715 miles an hour compared to 550 for the Tomahawk. It can go over and around objects and terrain, and even change its course so it can carve through layered defenses. It also has the ability to fly super duper low in sea skimming mode, making it even harder to detect and shoot down, especially with its stealthy design. On top of all that, it can also go after land-based targets. This new ship sinking capability, once mostly reserved for ships and aircraft, isn't going unnoticed by China. Right now, they're building the largest amphibious assault ship ever, known as the Type 76. This ship displaces 5,000 more tons than the America-class amphibious assault ships and has an electromagnetic aircraft launch system, or EMALS, something the US version does not, though F-35Bs and their fancy VTOL capability can and do operate from them. This new capability for China lets an amphibious landing force stay out of range of the Nemesis and Typhoon systems until their aircraft or ship-to-shore missiles can wipe them out. To give the Nemesis batteries a fighting chance against an onslaught of enemy aircraft and ordnance, long-neglected ground-based air defense is getting some love too. At the Modern Day Marine Conference just last month, they announced the X-Dex, a high-powered microwave weapon from Epirus. The giant yet still highly mobile microwave fries the electronics of incoming drones or disrupts them enough that they crash. For legal reasons, this is a joke and you should not do this, but if you're wondering if this is effective, go ahead and put your phone in the microwave and hit the popcorn button. This weapon isn't just made for drones and your phone, it can even be used against traditional aircraft and cruise missiles, giving those littoral anti-air batteries a lot of flexibility. Marines have also been deploying with the MADIS, or Marine Air Defense Integrated System, and even new man-portable counter-UAS devices that might remind some of you of the Thor and Guardian man packs from Iraq and Afghanistan. The MADIS and its sweet dune buggy version, the L-MADIS, have been around for a few years, but recently made their operational debut outside the US. Deploying with the 3rd MLR for Exercise Balikatan, or Balikatan, I'm sorry I screwed that up, just last month. The system combines a 30mm chain gun, Stinger missiles, and electronic weapons to take out incoming drones and other low-flying threats. These new toys open up a lot of possibilities for the US and the Pacific, but even the most advanced weapons in the world are worthless if you can't get them to where they need to be and resupply them with ordnance and feed the troops manning them. That puts logistics front and center in the Marines' Pacific strategy. Now, logistics is not sexy. You're not going to go up to somebody in a bar and say, "I'm a logistician," and have them fall in love with you. I was a logistician in the Marine Corps, so I know that firsthand. But that doesn't mean it is not important. At the recent exercise Bulikatan in the Philippines, it was on full display, with Marines testing the limits of their resupply and mobility capabilities, moving everything from high-tech weapons like the Nemesis to Bataan Island, which is different from Bataan, on its first ever deployment outside the United States, to the basics like food, ammo, and even human blood. The ability to rapidly move these systems across thousands of miles of open ocean, often under enemy threat, will be critical if the Corps hopes to hold these remote islands and deny sea lanes to an adversary like China. After all, they really do not want to relearn the lessons from World War II, like when Marines on Bataan and Wake Island were forced to surrender early in the war. Alright, so we've covered the new units, toys, and the headaches of keeping them supplied. Now let's talk about how MLRs could actually be used if the shooting starts. First few days of a Pacific conflict are likely to be absolute chaos, with both sides trying desperately to establish control over key islands and sea lanes. This is where the MLRs are designed to shine, at least on paper. They're lightweight and built for rapid deployments and decentralized operations, which means they can quickly move into position, set up their missile batteries and other weapons, and start locking down key maritime choke points before a larger force can arrive. The first wave of Marines would likely be landing on small, strategically important islands scattered all throughout the region, creating a lot of small, dispersed targets. They might be flown in on C-130s, Ospreys, or CH-53s if the distance allows, or dropped off by ships, and they'd be working from pre-established stockpiles of ammo, food, fuel, and spare parts set up during exercises like Bulikatan. Once on the ground, these units would need to dig in fast. Their priority would be to get systems like the Nemesis and X-Dex operational as quickly as possible, giving them the ability to strike at enemy ships and drones before they can establish themselves. This initial punch could disrupt an enemy's timeline, forcing them to slow down or divert resources to deal with the Marines before they can push forward. The littoral anti-air battalions would need to work quickly to set up defenses against enemy aircraft and drones, using systems like the Mattis to prevent this kind of rapid air assaults the Chinese might rely on to clear these outposts. But this kind of fight is not just about shooting back, it's also about staying alive long enough to keep shooting back. The Marines will have to be prepared to relocate quickly if they're found out, potentially abandoning gear and using pre-surveyed fallback positions. This is where those logistics units come into play, moving with them to keep the scattered companies and platoons supplied and the Marines fed. If this sounds like a brutal, fast-paced game of hide-and-seek with missiles and drones, that's because it is. This is the modern version of island hopping. It's not just landing Marines and pushing forward, but using a small, lethal force to turn entire island chains into missile barriers that can slow down or even halt a much larger force. The risk, of course, is that if the logistics chain breaks down and those MLRs can't be resupplied in time, these small units spread all over could quickly find themselves outgunned and outnumbered, forced into the same kind of desperate last stands that defined some of the bloodiest battles of World War II. There is a lot that can go wrong, and not everybody is on board with all these changes. Notably, a group of 24 retired generals, to include every living former commandant and former defense secretary Jim Mattis, have pushed back against this initiative. Former Marine Commandant General Charles Krulak and other retired Marine general officers wrote a blistering Washington Post commentary in 2022 trashing Force Design 2030. The generals wrote that the Marine Corps' plan was based on the flawed premise that technology would allow Marines to strike targets from great distances. They wrote, "War is inevitably a dirty business, and the war in Ukraine is a sample of what we may encounter in conflicts to come. Technology has not obviated the need for sustained artillery capabilities and armor." What they're basically saying there is even with fancy weapons like the Nemesis, Marines are still probably going to need heavier armor and a lot of artillery with cheaper shells like the 155 to stay in the fight. In 2023, retired Marine Lieutenant General Paul K. Van Ripper, who isn't one to hold back, told Task and Purpose that the Marine Corps' vision of deploying Marine littoral regiments two western Pacific islands so they could attack Chinese ships with Nemesis batteries is dumber than dirt. Van Ripper said the concept involves using slow-moving amphibious ships to put Marines ashore, and Chinese ships would simply stay out of range of the Marines' missiles. Remember what we mentioned about the Type 76? This is Wake Island all over again, Van Ripper said, referencing that famous iconic battle at the start of World War II when Marines with the 1st Defense Battalion, along with soldiers, sailors, and civilians, were forced to surrender to the Japanese after inflicting heavy losses on the enemy, but ultimately running out of ammo and supplies. In 2023, the Center for Strategic and International Studies think tank in Washington, D.C. carried out some war games, and they found that if a Marine littoral regiment were deployed to Taiwan prior to a Chinese invasion, it would be impossible to resupply after the fighting started. They wrote, the MLR became a ground infantry battalion, augmenting the 114 combat battalions of the Taiwanese ground forces. This means that after just a short while, everything that makes a littoral combat team special, like the Nemesis, would be useless. With so much hinging on this weapon, that seems less than ideal. Another controversial aspect of Force Design 2030, besides dumping the Abrams, has been the decision to get rid of Scout Sniper platoons. Operating in pairs of spotters and shooters, Scout Snipers don't just take out enemy troops and equipment without being detected. They also provide forward reconnaissance and observation for infantry battalions. But in 2023, the Marine Corps announced it was replacing Scout Sniper platoons with a 26 Marine Scout platoon to provide infantry battalions with more all-weather capabilities to conduct intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions. Retired Master Sergeant Tim Parkhurst, who at the time was the president and chief executive officer of the United States Marine Corps Scout Sniper Association, told Task and Purpose that most military commanders did not understand what capabilities Scout Snipers bring to the fight. He said, if we can't hit a target with our rifle, we can sure as hell report on the target and send that information back to our unit commander. He has a point, and while drones and other means of conducting ISR are available, there are just some instances where having a human eye on target is the only way to go. There's an old saying that no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Or, in the immortal words of heavyweight champion of the world and ear connoisseur Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. With that said, it remains to be seen how well Force Design 2030 will play out if the Cold War between the United States and China ever turns hot, but the Corps doesn't seem to have any desire to abandon it just yet. This script was a collaborative effort between Isaac Saypharath, Jeff Schogol, and myself, and the editing was done by Savvy. If you have any feedback at all, like if the background music is too loud, which it shouldn't be in this one, or if you just don't like my face, go ahead and leave it in the comments, and you'll see me respond and maybe cry.